This is Grimm's lawyer, and I am here to explain what conlang with me is and what has happened to the first 2 sessions of conlang with me. So, I am recording this after having completed the 6th session of conlang with me, and I am just going to go through what happened with the first 2 sessions. I explained this a bit in the 3rd session of conlang with me, so you should be able to see there a more in-depth description of what was actually covered. But first I'm going to explain a little bit of what conlang with me is. So one thing I do in sort of my free time is I like to make conlangs, constructed languages, and I decided that I was going to make this one while streaming on Twitch to help motivate me, actually spend some in-depth time thinking about things with the conlang and slow down my process, because I tend to make conlangs pretty quickly. I get through a lot of the grammar stuff, the decisions, pretty quickly and handily, because I have sort of processes that I go through to get things done quickly, and I usually have a pretty clear idea of what I want pretty early on. And because of just my process, I tend to expedite a lot of things. But the issue with that is lately I've been, cranking out a conlang that I like based on some kind of feature or aesthetic I want to explore. I make it, and then I just kind of abandon it pretty quickly. There are a few conlangs that I've spent a lot more time on and still use and cherish, but lately a lot of the conlangs I've made have just been made and then kind of ignored or put on the back burner really quickly, just because I get a new idea really quickly. So what I've done with conlang with me is I wanted to choose a goal that would be something I would actually use the conlang for, other than what my recent goals have been with conlangs. So I decided that I wanted to make a language that is particularly suited to my use in writing about humanities and social studies topics and social sciences, so particularly history, linguistics, anthropology, and some of these other topics here. Just something for myself to use to get that information across in a more detailed, compact, and aesthetic way than it would be just taking my typical notes in English. Just something that would be fun to use, but that I would actually use, because I do study a lot of these topics just for fun. And then in a more serious context, I do a lot of work with linguistics and anthropology, so it would actually be relevant to me, which is why I decided to make this the goal. During the first 2 sessions, I kind of mapped out what I wanted to do first. Since the first session, I made like an agenda sheet, and so this kind of details what I've done thus far. And in each of these sessions, since I put this up, we've kind of gone through what we've done in our little review segments, and then continued on to the next item. So I'm not going to go through everything I did in the first 2 sessions here. For that, I would recommend looking at session 3, which should be the second video that is up on my YouTube channel. But I will give a sort of brief description of what was covered. So we covered the fact that I wanted nouns, and nouns in particular, noun classes, of which I currently have 8. In sessions 3, 4, and 5, you will see 10. noun classes, and I'll kind of explain those. And then in session 6, I explain why I kind of reduced some of the classes. This may go back up to 9, though. And then, and I talked about number as well, what my numbers will be. And I settled on a collective mass as the default, and then singulative count noun as my marked number. And then in session 2, I talked about verbs. This was the verb system I landed on in the second session. This down here is the system I have now after the 6th session. I kept that up for the sake of being able to show it in this explanation video. But currently I have 2 aspects, perfective and imperfective, which can also cover the gnomic aspect. I have 2 moods, realis and irrealis, for real events and then hypothetical, or abstract or non-concrete reality. So those are my moods. And then I have, in the realis, I have 2 evidentialities. I have direct and indirect. And my direct and indirect evidentialities are a little bit unique in that they're based on what my source is. So I can be the source of direct evidentiality. That's how direct typically works. But also a primary source document that is confirming this information that I'm giving with the verb would also be direct. It's only if I have a secondary source that's not primary source that I would use the indirect. So it's a little bit different than how it works in natural languages, like the Turkic languages, which have this system of evidentiality, or something like this system. So that was verbs. And in the second session, I also talked a little bit about my syntax. I got as far as the transitivity. So I landed on a fluid S active status system, which is a system I use in a lot of conlangs. I haven't been using it as much recently in my conlangs, but for this one, I felt it made the most sense to do, given the types of sentences I'm going to be using a lot of the time, especially with history. I'm going to be sort of flipping between intransitives with patientive, which would be stative, sort of subjects, and agentive, transitive sentences where something happens to that patient. A lot, that's probably going to happen a lot, I suspect. And so that is the system I have that I decided upon. All the subsequent stuff, all the other stuff you see here, that is all recorded in sessions after the second session. It's just the first and second session that are not available currently. And I'm going to briefly go over why that is, if people are interested. I did mention this in session 3, but I will briefly re-explain what happened. Basically, I am very new to Twitch, and the first session was simply not recorded. I simply forgot to record it and make sure that the VOD would go up onto Twitch. So there is just no record of it anymore. And the second session had the audio from the stream streaming over the audio as I was saying it. So it was inaudible. So even though I recorded that one, there was no way for me really to salvage that. So that one was also made unavailable. And I just ended up deleting the file because all that was really gotten through in the second session was the verbs and the syntax, and I ended up re-explaining that in session 3 anyway, so I felt like it wasn't worth trying to just completely scrape the overlay. I don't know if I have the skill to do that, nor do I know if it's even possible. I looked around and checked if it was possible. I didn't really see a way that I, on my device and with the amount of space I have on my laptop, could make it work. but I ended up re-explaining everything I talked about in sessions 1 and 2 in session 3. So if you want a more in-depth explanation, you will be able to see that in the session 3 recording. So that is all for my intro to conlang with me. It's just my little project I'm doing where I'm conlanging and explaining my process a little bit more thoroughly and closely, which helps me and maybe could help viewers see an example of someone making a conlang. I know I'm not the only one making this kind of content, but I'm enjoying it this far, and I hope others could as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope that explains a little bit of what this is if you're confused, and I hope to see you in my next stream. Thank you very much.